How a street criminal became a ghost the FBI couldn't find. On the night of December 23, 1994, a phone rang in a South Boston bar. The man who picked it up was James Whitey Bulger, the most powerful crime boss in New England. The call came from an old friend inside the FBI. Sealed indictments had come down from Washington. Federal agents were preparing to arrest him within days. Bulger thanked the man, hung up the phone, and walked out into the cold. He collected his girlfriend, packed a bag of cash and fake identification, and drove out of Boston that same night. He would not sleep in his own city again for 16 years. What almost no one knew, not the public, not most of his own gang, was that the tip had come from the FBI itself. Because for nearly 2 decades, Whitey Bulger had been one of the Bureau's own informants. The FBI had protected him, fed him information on his rivals, looked away from his murders. And when the moment finally came to arrest him, one of their own agents made sure he vanished first. What followed was one of the longest manhunts in American history. A street kid from a South Boston housing project became a ghost the FBI could not find. Chapter 1. The Project Kid. James Joseph Bulger was born in Boston in September 1929. His father was a dock worker who had lost an arm in an accident, and the family fell into poverty. They relocated to the Old Harbor Housing Project in South Boston in 1938. It was a neighborhood of narrow streets, hard men, and little opportunity. Bulger earned the nickname Whitey for his pale blonde hair, a name he reportedly hated. He was arrested for the first time at 14 on a larceny charge. He drifted between street gangs, small robberies, and short stints in reform school. In 1948, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, serving 4 years before an honorable discharge. He returned to Boston and returned just as quickly to crime. In 1956, he was convicted of armed robbery and hijacking and sentenced to federal prison. Inside prison, he volunteered or was persuaded to take part in a covert program testing LSD on inmates. He later said the drug gave him nightmares for the rest of his life. He served 9 years, released in 1965, and came home to South Boston with nothing but his name. He went to work as a bookmaker and loan shark for the Killeen brothers, the gang that then ran Southey's rackets. Within a few years, a bloody gang war would put him in position to take it all. Chapter 2. The Deal. By the early 1970s, Bulger had emerged as a rising power in the Winter Hill Gang. In 1975, an FBI agent named John Connolly, who had grown up in the same housing project, approached him with an offer. The Italian mafia was already feeding the FBI information about Bulger's crew. Connolly told him, "Why not fight fire with fire?" Bulger agreed on one condition. "I will not be called an informant," he reportedly said. "I will be your strategist." In secret meetings, Bulger and his partner Stephen Flemmi began feeding the FBI details on their rivals in the Patriarca crime family. In return, Connolly made sure Bulger's own crimes were overlooked, buried, or never investigated at all. It was, in Flemmi's later words, a trade of nothing for gold. They gave the Bureau scraps, and the Bureau gave them cover. Using that intelligence, Bulger helped the FBI dismantle the Angiulo crime family, his own competition, and the Bureau called it a triumph against the mafia. With the Italian mob crippled and the FBI looking away, Bulger filled the vacuum himself. By 1979, he controlled the Winter Hill Gang outright. Chapter 3. The Untouchable. For the next 15 years, Bulger ran loan sharking, extortion, gun running, and drug operations across Boston, protected, almost untouchable. He was tied to 19 murders, prosecutors would later allege, rivals, informants, and people who simply knew too much. He cultivated a strange kind of local folk hero status, handing out Thanksgiving turkeys and fixing up his old neighborhood. In 1991, he even claimed a share of a $14 million state lottery jackpot on a ticket sold from a store he controlled. His own brother, William Bulger, was president of the Massachusetts State Senate, one of the most powerful men in the state, sitting one branch of government away from him. Twice, investigations into Bulger's gang were quietly shut down after Connolly intervened on his behalf. FBI supervisors accepted gifts, cash, and favors, and let the relationship deepen. Whitey Bulger was, on paper, an FBI asset. In practice, he was one of the most violent criminals in the country, operating with federal cover. Chapter 4. The Warning. By the early 1990s, cracks were forming. Other law enforcement agencies had grown suspicious that the FBI's Boston office was compromised. In April 1994, the DEA, the Massachusetts State Police, and the Boston Police launched their own investigation into Bulger, and deliberately kept the FBI out of it. Bookmakers came forward, willing to testify that they had paid Bulger protection money for years. A federal racketeering case began to take shape. Connolly had officially retired from the FBI in 1990, but his loyalty to his old informant hadn't ended. In December 1994, word reached him that sealed indictments were coming down from the Department of Justice. Connolly picked up the phone. Chapter 5. The Vanishing. On December 23, 1994, Bulger left Boston with his girlfriend, Teresa Stanley, and did not look back. He had prepared for this moment for years, quietly stashing cash, jewelry, and false passports in safe deposit boxes across 2 continents: Florida, Montreal, Dublin, London, Venice. Stanley returned home within weeks, unable to live a life on the run. Bulger reached out to another woman, Catherine Gregg, his longtime companion, and within a couple of years she had joined him permanently. Behind him in Boston, his top lieutenants were arrested one by one under the racketeering indictment. Bulger himself was gone. For the first time in 20 years, the FBI was hunting the man it had once called its own. Chapter 6. The Ghost. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in FBI history. Bulger and Gregg were reportedly sighted across the country and around the world: Louisiana, Wyoming, Mississippi, London, Vancouver. In reality, he never left the country at all. He and Gregg settled quietly into a rent-controlled apartment in Santa Monica, California, living under the names Charles and Carol Gasco. He kept a low profile, avoided old contacts, and lived off a fortune once estimated near $50 million. Wary that his outdated $100 bills might draw suspicion, he reportedly took loads of cash to Las Vegas, traded them for casino chips, played a few hands, then cashed out in fresh bills. He appeared on America's Most Wanted 16 times. He was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, with a $2 million reward for his capture, second only to the bounty once placed on Osama bin Laden. For 16 years, investigators, journalists, and an entire city asked the same question: where's Whitey? He was hiding in plain sight the entire time. Chapter 7. The Cat. The break came not from Bulger, but from Catherine Gregg. Investigators knew she had a habit of getting cosmetic, dental, and plastic surgery wherever she lived. In 2011, the FBI ran a new kind of advertisement, aimed not at Bulger, but at women who might have seen Gregg in a beauty parlor or a dentist's chair. The ads aired across the country, alongside the $2 million reward. Within a day, a former neighbor who had since moved overseas recognized the couple from the broadcast and called in a tip. She remembered them from an ordinary kindness. They had once helped her care for a stray cat in the neighborhood. "A cat got me captured," Bulger later said. On June 22, 2011, FBI agents lured Bulger out of his apartment building under a false pretense and arrested him in the parking garage. He was 81 years old. Inside the apartment, agents found more than 30 guns, fake identification, and over $800,000 in cash hidden in the walls. The most wanted fugitive in America had been living 4 blocks from the Pacific Ocean the entire time. Closing. Bulger was returned to Boston to face justice. In 2013, a federal jury convicted him on 31 counts, including racketeering, extortion, money laundering, and participation in 11 murders. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 5 years. Catherine Gregg was sentenced to 8 years for helping him hide. John Connolly, the agent who made him a ghost, was convicted separately of racketeering and second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years. Bulger spent his final years moving between federal prisons. On October 29, 2018, he was transferred to a high-security penitentiary in West Virginia. He arrived in a wheelchair, placed into the general population despite decades of being known, in prison and out as an informant. Fellow inmates identified him within hours. Less than 12 hours after he arrived, Whitey Bulger was beaten to death in his cell. He was 89 years old. The label he had spent a lifetime running from, snitch, rat, informant, followed him to the very end. The man who had once been the FBI's most valuable source, and then its most humiliating failure, was finally caught not by brilliant detective work, but by a photograph of a woman feeding a stray cat. For 16 years, the most wanted street criminal in America hid 4 blocks from the ocean, protected, in the end, by nothing but silence. Every story leaves a trace. This has been traced.